It's 2013, and the all-powerful Bilderberg meeting, or more appropriately, the all-connected Bilderberg meeting, is underway in the UK here in early June of 2013 in Hertfordshire, UK. I've also seen it referred to as Watford, UK, something like that. Anyway, I'm not there. I'm here on the stateside, but I thought I would help you with the analysis of the agenda. By now, more and more people have heard about the Bilderberg meetings. Pretty much anyone who's tuned into alternative media, and you see quite a bit of the mainstream media covering it, even if it's just to say it's lizard people and what have you. But I'm going to give you an analysis that I hope won't be dry. I hope it'll open your eyes to the fact that this globalized world works on a basis of key players who have inside connections and really help make things happen. So Bilderberg is talking this year about, can the U.S. and Europe grow faster and create jobs? They're talking about job entitlements and debt. They're talking about how big data is changing almost everything. They're talking about nationalism and populism, U.S. foreign policy, Africa's challenges, cyber warfare, and the proliferation of asymmetric threats, major trends in medical research, online education, promise and impacts, politics of the European Union, developments in the Middle East, and other current affairs. Of course, we know these are euphemisms. A lot of backdoor private meetings and sub-meetings go on amidst these very influential 140, 150 people who meet at Bilderberg, and many of them are posted on the list, about 120 or so, but definitely another dozen or two attend without having their names published on the list, usually some very high-level people. But this shows you they're involved very deeply in European Union affairs. They created the European Union. They've been working on it since the early 50s, really just since the post-war world. Bilderberg has taken credit in the past for creating the euro, the currency that is now driving the entire continent into austerity, forcing all these debt maneuverings, forcing the population to be controlled and for the banks to take bigger power. Really shows how they create their own crises so they can seize greater power and provide the solutions. They're very much interested in the rise of populism, the role of people waking up, and how they can steam valve that through national politics, phony figures, and try to recaptivate the interests of the people towards the bigger state, even if they believe in smaller power stuff. In a very big way, you see the rise of cyber warfare. A lot of talk about cyber terrorism, counter cyber threats. For a long time now, you've had General Keith Alexander, the head of the NSA, but also the head of the Cyber Warfare Division of the United States military, attending these meetings, and a lot of major tech people. In particular, there's Peter Thiel of Silicon Valley, one of the co-founders of PayPal, who's now on the steering committee of Bilderberg, and he invites a lot of very high-level, very important technical people. There's Peter Thiel. And so I wanted to tell you while we're discussing these topics and what might be going on behind the scenes, these important people on the steering committee who direct Bilderberg's agenda and who invite the other people who come to the meeting. And so you've got a lot of bankers based in Europe and the United States, like Joseph Ackerman. You've got people like Marcus Aegeus, who's at the Barclays Bank, and he played an interesting role because he's not only the chairman of Barclays, but he's also the head of the British board that sets the LIBOR rates, and Barclays was the key bank involved in the LIBOR scandal. Well, I don't know if this guy could have been involved. He was only heading the bank during the period of the crisis and has now moved away from it. But here he is at meetings at Bilderberg directing affairs. You've also got Roger C. Altman of Evercore Partners, and he's connected to high-level U.S. finance and politics. I think he's an Obama guy, if I recall correctly. And you've got some of these guys like Francisco Pinto Balsamo, who is from Europe there, one of the Latin countries. You've got Nicolas Bavarez from France. This firm, Gibson, Dunn, and Crutcher, I looked them up earlier. They are major lawyers for some of the biggest firms, and it really shows you their role in the agenda there. Some of their top lawyers are Ken Starr, who goes to Bohemian Grove and was the famous prosecutor of Bill Clinton. during the Monica Lewinsky scandal and that inquiry. And you've also got Ted Olson, whose wife died on 9/11 and allegedly called him from Flight 93, which a lot of people find to be incredulous. And they're both Bush-related appointees. But Gibson, Dunn, and Crutcher has represented, here it is down here, Apple Inc. on patent infringement suits, Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook in a $17 billion contract dispute. They have represented Chevron in a $27 billion environmental dispute in Ecuador. That's a big deal that they don't talk a lot about. They have represented Walmart in an $11 billion employment discrimination suit, Dole Food Companies in a multi-billion-dollar toxic suit, the Intel Corporation in a multi-billion-dollar antitrust lawsuit. They've been defending Amazon.com, and founder Jeff Bezos is attending Bilderberg again this year, and he's been there a few times in recent years. Ted Olson represented the NFL players during the lockout. He also did some same-sex marriage stuff. The firm represented NBC Universal in regard to the Conan O'Brien contract dispute, Viacom, several car companies, and a whole lot more, including Kraft, who we just did a report on, and a $19.7 billion bid for the Cadbury Egg Company, Vivendi, and other media people. So they're really deeply involved. An interesting member of the Bilderberg Steering Committee, Marcus Aegeus from Barclays, I forgot to mention, is married into the Rothschild family. So is Franco Barnaby, who heads Telecom Italia, a major telecom player there and a member of the steering committee, but also head of Rothschild Europe. Okay, you've got some of the Norwegians. You've got Juan Luis Cebrian, who's Spanish. He's in the media groups. You've got Edmund Clark from Canada. He runs TD Bank. You've got Kenneth Clark from Great Britain, Member of Parliament. Etienne Davignon used to be the chairman of Bilderberg. He's a big Belgian player. Now he's just a minister of state, but still deeply involved in affairs. Thomas Enders, who does a lot of big industrial stuff, as I recall. He's from Germany. You've got Ulrich Federspiel from Denmark. You've got Victor Halberstadt from the Netherlands. Kenneth Jacobs from Lazard. And James A. Johnson, he's an interesting figure because he was involved in the housing collapse that led to the larger economic crisis that we're still under. And he, at the time of that crisis, he was the head of Fannie Mae, which collapsed, and he was a board member for Goldman Sachs. And there's a very interesting, very accessible documentary called Inside Job about that banking scandal, and it shows in detail the role that Goldman Sachs played in toppling AIG by essentially betting the derivatives market against them. And this basically caused the housing market to implode. James A. Johnson was all over that. He was later investigated in relation to the countrywide preferential loan scandal. And here he is still on the steering committee of Bilderberg. And we'll see that there's also somebody from AIG on Bilderberg. I don't know if we'll get to him right now. You've got House of Lords John Kerr, Klaus Kleinfeld from Alcoa, the big steel company, plays a role in fluoride manufacturing. You've got the Turkish guy, Mustafa Kok. You've got Marie-José Kravis. She's very interesting. She's married to Henry Kravis, who's one of the leading partners for KKR. They do leverage buyouts and really put a lot of larger Fortune 100 companies on the derivatives market, set up the dominoes for global connections. And then his wife, Marie-José Kravis, heads the Hudson Institute, which was founded by one of the founders of the RAND Corporation, very much globalist-oriented, military-industrial complex-oriented. Hudson does a lot of CFR-style roundtable meetings with illuminated fellows. Jessica T. Matthews runs the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. She's been to Bilderberg as long as I can recall. And these big foundations who do philanthropy are very, very much at the center of the entire global agenda. You've seen how much we've talked about the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation. Obviously, Carnegie Endowment plays a big role. Interestingly, Andrew Carnegie felt like this entity was getting away from him, and he tried to defund it just a couple of years after setting it up. But apparently, control was taken out from under him even during his lifetime. Craig J. Munday of the Microsoft Corporation, obviously doing a lot of tech steering for Bilderberg. and probably plays a role also with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Royal Dutch Shell, Jorma Olia, also connects to Queen Beatrix, whose father, Prince Bernhard, was the founder of Bilderberg. Richard N. Pearl, nicknamed the Prince of Darkness and head of the American Enterprise Institute, very much an architect of the Iraq War, very much involved in Middle Eastern wars and politics, and also on that right-leaning think tank side. Heather Reisman with Indigo Books, she's been involved for a long time, big music company. She's also involved in the Lone Soldier, I think it is, which is foreign citizens of Israel who go back to fight. You've got Rudolf Scholten from, I think that's Australia, I forget the acronyms. No, I'm sorry, it must be Austria. Österreich Control Bank, so another banker. Peter Sutherland, very interesting. He's not only chairman of Goldman Sachs International, he was also chairman of the BP Corporation, but resigned about a year before the big oil spill. We've already mentioned Peter Thiel, but more and more he's on the upward trend of the new cadre of Bilderberg players who are using technology to socially manipulate, to socially engineer society. Another banker, Jean-Claude Trichet, European Central Bank, a very important entity. We've talked about their control over Europe, some members from Greece, and a few other countries. Jacob Wallenberg, his father was one of the founding members there from Sweden and involved in banking, lots of other areas. Kevin Warsh, a former, I believe he's still actually a board member of the Federal Reserve, also at the Hoover Institute. And David Rockefeller, from what I understand, is too old to attend now. I don't know if he went this year, but always involved until he dies. Anyway, back to the topics real quick till I wrap up this video. They're dealing with all kinds of U.S. foreign policy, Africa challenges, and the Middle East all at the same time. And Bilderberg has had an untold role in the Arab Springs. You've probably heard about groups like George Soros's International Crisis Group, who works with Brzezinski to kind of manipulate these sub-diplomatic uprisings in Middle Eastern countries in particular, other areas of Europe, even Russia and Mexico. And just a couple days ago I wrote about this guy, Jared Cohen, who's just co-authored a book with Eric Schmidt, who is of course at Bilderberg and has been many times in the past few years. I don't think he's on the steering committee yet, but it doesn't really matter. And admittedly, Jared Cohen, who used to work at the State Department, played a role in the Arab Spring. He was there at the time of the Egyptian uprising. He met with that key executive, Wael Ghonim, who was a Google executive who was involved in creating the Facebook page that got the Egyptian revolution moving, who led to the Tahrir Square moment. And Jared Cohen is the founder and director of Google Ideas, who are not only a think tank, but a think-do tank, who again was created by Google's Eric Schmidt in 2010. And there's all kinds of quotes from Condoleezza Rice and more about his role in using the internet to spark revolution and counter-revolution, counter-radicalization strategies, and U.S. policy towards Iran and the Middle East. And you find other members and parts of their agenda connecting in with that, especially as more of these tech people are invited, and cyber warfare connects directly with that agenda item. And on the eugenics front, you've got major invitees who are involved in politics this year. We covered one of them in our most recent article, 1,000 Points of Light, Bilderberg's 2013 NWO connections. They are infinite in point of fact. And this guy right here, this is a parody picture, but he's quite strange looking in reality. Nicholas Eberstadt has been sponsored by the Rockefeller Foundation as a visiting research fellow, and pretty much is all about the world population crisis and critiques the role of the Rockefeller Foundation, the Packard Foundation, the Ford Foundation, and of course the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And he's probably there this year to discuss major trends in medical research and how big data is changing almost everything. These are items on the actual admitted Bilderberg meeting topic list this year. Then all your bankers are going to be there discussing, can the U.S. and Europe grow faster and create jobs? And they're also discussing jobs, entitlements, and debt. They're going to suck out those pension funds and leverage them on the derivatives market. and they're still concerned about domestic affairs as well. I'm going to sign off for now. This is just a research stub, but gives you a pretty good idea of what's going on at the secretive meeting. If you just track the names, find out what boards they're on, where they've been and where they're going, and who they're inviting, you'll get a pretty good idea of what Bilderberg is trying to do on the global scene. Stay tuned for more coverage at TrueStreamMedia.com.